Hi there, and welcome to the webinar with myself, Daniel. Today's topic is data management and the cloud, and how is your data affected, and what's the best practices to work around that. Now, excuse me, we've had discussions around data management, products like Vault, connecting Vault with BIM 360, connecting Vault with tools like the Fusion Teams, also sharing it with shared views, which all make up this cloud connection and cloud data management. However, before we get right into that, we want to speak about some of the key benefits around data management itself. Now, to start up, I'm going to play a little video. Be very amped for this type of discussion. As you see there from that sort of video snippet, we found that data management, using a data management solution or a strategy of having a data management strategy, can resolve quite a bit of problems. Now, just looking at the agenda very quickly, it's not too long. When you look at digital transformation and manufacturing imperative, we know that everything is changing, everything is becoming digital. There's Internet of Things, there's machine learning, all these really cool industrial 4.0 stuff that's happening. But where it starts off is at the first stage of it. Then we look at the product data management itself, the impact of having a strategy, collaboration inside and outside of your firewalls. So collaborating with suppliers, people outside that don't necessarily need to have access to your environment, as well as the impact of having a strategy. And then we'll take questions at the end. So let's have a look at some of the takeaways from this. From here, I think the key areas from this webinar is perhaps understanding what product data management is about. Sorry for that. And the impacts of having a digital PDM strategy in this whole digital transformation phase or era that we have. Also understanding the need for collaboration, understanding what connected data management inside the firewall and outside the firewall is, and the benefits of having a strategy. If we jump straight into the digital transformation, now we find that this is some information that's been taken out from the Aberdeen group on connected data management, and we find that digital transformation is the integration of digital technology into different areas of the business, right? And it fundamentally changes how we operate. So why digitization, and what is it doing for manufacturing? We all know the explosion of data. Now, when it comes to data, we know that data is like a new currency, being very protected. We try and keep our data safe. We try and protect it. The data that we create is generally our intellectual property that we create. There's also new computing capabilities compared to a while ago, where we can now do things with data that essentially we couldn't do 5 years ago. And of course, there's technology advancements in automation, robotics, AI, things like generative design, additive manufacturing, and all of these add-ins that's been coming across. So digital transformation, what is a digital transformation? It's to enable advancements into areas such as the Internet of Things, the Industry 4.0, augmented reality, virtual reality, and having a PDM process or PDM strategy allows us to actually work in the Industry 4.0 tools, or gear ourselves up for Industry 4.0. The reason for that is the data that we create is the first part of it. We start off with that data because if that data that we create is not protected or is not correct, we cannot achieve downstream results in the Industry 4.0, or if we're gearing ourselves for that. So a little bit of discussion on this. The world is changing, we know that, and manufacturers need to digitize in order to advance. So the question is, what are we doing to actually digitize this and move forward? Okay, the digital transformation can look at a number of different things, but in here, we're going to look at just the product data management, for example. Why? Well, remember the point that data is exploding, and we're experiencing this in the manufacturing industry today. Most manufacturers aren't harnessing all of the data at their disposal, right? And for this, it becomes a major issue. And also, you see it as a major opportunity loss moving forward, okay? Because we find that best-in-class manufacturers are striving to create an environment in which they can tap into product data that's been existing, or intelligence that existed. And there's a couple of ways to do it. And by driving into this, you find that there's a consistent saving of cost, design cost, improvement of engineering productivity is enhanced, the launch of new products on time is much better, also delivering higher quality of products that we find. And this is that's been taken off the Aberdeen group, that allows us to actually look at this data management, data loss that we find that's been happening, and what does the best practices and good performers do to actually overcome these issues. If we find out what is PDM, so what is PDM? So PDM is, or product data management, is having a strategy of managing your product related information and engineering processes in one spot. So basically, the single source of the truth, right? And this is also highlighted in a guide, differentiate the definitive guide to PDM, and I will make this available to you for reading afterwards. So please, once the webinar is done, or as we're going through the webinar, please just type in your email addresses on the comments box and I'll send this to you, or I can pull this off the registration list and send it to the users that want the information. And what this allows us to do is having the ability to connect with customers, supply chain, any design contractors that we may work with, or people that work out of a home office or abroad. So you get a lot of consultants that probably don't sit in the same office as you, and allows you to collaborate with them. Now, what it means is you collaborate inside of your firewall, that's inside of your office, as well as outside, and your data is protected. So what does it mean when we talk about it? It is the central location for all design files. Any file-related properties or indexing that needs to happen, it happens in one central location. The reuse of existing design. Now, this has been quite a big thing because we find that it kickstarts the design, the ability to reuse data that we've created in the past. And of course, collaborating with other engineers, having different inputs, and also being able to review and approve engineering changes that need to happen. And of course, managing the documentation that supports our engineering design. Now, if we look at some of the areas where strategy is lacking, and we've looked at clients, or we've had discussions with clients that had buried in spreadsheets or emails and waste too much time searching and creating reports of things. When these are problems that are firsthand. I mean, a lot of people experience this. People have issues extending the information past the firewall. And this results in higher costs. So higher costs when compared to having a strategy to allow us to actually create these sharing opportunities. Risk of quality in future. All right. So basically, the lack of transparency hinders corrective or preventive action that we might need to take, and also increases the compliance feature or compliancy for us. Right. Delayed schedules without enterprise-wide visibility. You find that there's a misconnection between the tracking process becomes difficult, right? Bill of material management becomes widely unused, and you find that there's quite a bit of delays in schedules in that way, but also difficulty when collaborating. Okay, collaborating in the design environments come with high challenges, right? And we find that some of these costs include duplication of data, poor insight into project statuses, as well as less informed decisions being made, right? And these are some of the big areas that we see, and it's also highlighted in this case study as well about not having a proper data management strategy. But having a connected data management, and some of the impacts that we see here is that what you can expect from a fully integrated PDM strategy, in short, a single clean system for viewing product data across the enterprise, right? And we find that the people, process, data, and the systems that make up the business are related to the contributing factors of every single bit of this. And we see that some of the best-in-class companies moving forward have 20% faster, are moving 20% faster towards connected data management. The reason for this is they reduce costs and higher their margins, improving products are being improved in operation, manufacturing, design, right, as well as higher product quality. There is a streamlined design process, okay, that as well as improving collaboration between operations, manufacturing, quality engineering, and productivity. So no time is really wasted in this. And if we look at some stats here, we see that engineers on their own spend on average 15% of their time managing data. This is quite a bit of time. And when we look at that, we find that we generally don't have that time to actually go and find data or look for data or manage data in between the team. And 57% of engineers use network drives or shared folders to actually manage data. So this research has been done by Tech Clarity that looked at Windows Explorer, and we know that Windows Explorer was not made for engineers, right? Or DOS people, designers for that matter, to manage data. And if we look at the point of it, it was made for efficient CAD management. It's not made for efficient CAD management. So you don't have such functionalities like you would have in a proper data management tool. Sorry, I think we just skipped quite a bit there. Sorry about that. It's a bit of a technical difficulty there on my side. Okay, we're back. All right, so if we look at it, we know that becomes a challenge. Some of the issues resulting into data management losses of time, we see that if you look at sharing with other departments, around about 49% of people have that issue. Finding the right information. Now, this is actually something that we don't really consider, but we spend a lot of time searching for data. Is it correct? Is it the latest version that we're looking for? Is it the release version? Does it have the correct bill of materials? Managing change. If there's any changes that need to happen, these becomes issues. Working with wrong or outdated data. Now, I know a lot of us have these issues, and we've come across this in the past. Reusing data. Now, this becomes critical, when, especially if you look at the intelligence that you create, the work that you put in. Why not reuse it and work with it? Often we can't, because if we do save as in CAD files, there's sometimes links that's created, and it becomes an issue. And we also see that collaborating with engineers in different locations also become an issue. But of course, sharing info internally as well. If we could do that, that would be great for us as we able to actually share this intellectual property that we create internally. So some of the local challenges that we find, and now we've been talking a lot about stats, but these are some of the local challenges that are picked up from discussions with people around this data management tools. And we find that managing engineering changes is actually quite a challenge, because the data go out, the design's approved, released for manufacturing, it goes out, something changes. How does it come back? Where does that change get tracked? And how do you refer back to it years down the line? And these are things that become quite a challenge. File searching, believe it or not, a lot of people spend hours in the day looking for the correct file. having an accurate bill of materials. If your bill of materials are correct, the ordering processes or orders for that job is correct as well. Data reuse, again, going back to the data and intelligence that you created in the past, reusing that. Integrating into ERP systems, as well as protection of intellectual property. I think protection of intellectual property is the biggest for all of us, because the data that we create needs to be protected somehow or the other. Fortunately, to overcome these challenges, you'll need a file management system that's made for engineers, right? Not just something like Windows Explorer or something that you can put in a shared drive. And this brings us to the next point. It comes down to product data management. Fundamentals of that is the data we create, the people that create the data, and of course, the process that we use to actually work and share that data. If we jump into data and just look at it from a high level, we see that securing your intellectual property is key here. Capturing and reusing engineering knowledge is also key in data. If we go into people, we see that improving engineering productivity is one of the big things here, facilitating internal and external collaboration as well. As well as the process, we look at controlling engineering process and ensuring compliance. Now, if we look at compliance is actually quite big, because if we understand what the compliance issues are or how to stay compliant, we can set up enforcement of rules that we follow that. And having a data management tool would allow us to actually see where we could be non-compliant. So having a PDM strategy, and it removes repetitive tasks and, of course, frustrations involved, reusing, searching, things that we spoke about, things like engineering change orders. But how do we do that? How do we achieve that? So here's how. Checking in and checking out files. So this becomes important, especially if you're working with a group of people where you don't have abilities to not to overwrite the next guy's work. So very often we find that we might look at a file that's been created by our colleagues and mistakenly press the save button. And what we do is we overwrite what they've done. Versioning, knowing what's the latest version, right? And being able to track and work off the latest version. Sometimes we need to go back to older versions of the file. How do we manage it? How do we do it? Do we create constant backups? Do we have duplicates? And these becomes critical when having a strategy that we implement for data management. But searching as well, so not just for the file name, also searching for content that could be created years back, created by a specific person, individual, or alternatively searching by a material name that may have been used. And this boils down to also having multiple search criteria. So that you might have the best result that is available to you for the search that you require. And of course, saving searches. So if something that you're searching for often, you could actually save that search, and instead of typing it in all the time, just go in and work off your saved search. Copying files as well. Copying files sometimes becomes an issue when we need to reuse them, especially if we're using parametric tools with links attached to them. You may think it's copied, but it's actually not, and whatever changes happens affects the original file that you copied off, and you want to try and avoid that. So copying, the easiest ways to do it, copying and reusing files, perhaps also renaming them as well, and managing design changes that may have taken place, or the history of the design, seeing what went on with the design, what was the engineering output, or what was the engineering thinking behind the design, and what were the comments that was made to facilitate that design. Of course, if we're copying models or designs, we also need to think about renaming them, and what are the quick and easiest ways to do that. Working locally, saving globally. Again, here, if you're working with teams outside of your office, or working with colleagues that may not be in the same area as you, how do you collaborate and how does that data update when you're working with it? But I think one of the big things is also the review and approval process, because we find that when we need data to be approved and reviewed, is it a manual process that we follow, or is it a digital process that allows us to actually have data that we create approved and moved on to released, or if it's approved, not approved, and it's reviewed, but it needs to be worked on. How is that tracked and changed? Tracking control of the data, of course, having the ability to give the right people the right access at the right time, and giving feedback to the data that we've created as well. So one of the big things to do that is the life cycle states. So, assigning a life cycle state to a file, or a file that lives in a specific life cycle state, allows us to look at work in progress, reviewed, or released, to manufacturing. It could be also obsolete. And what this would do is it would allow us to have a digital process from each stage to say, if the file is still being worked on, it becomes a work in progress file. So it's being worked, it's being used. If the file is pushed on to the next stage for review, it's reviewed by someone, and whatever comments or changes that need to happen to it goes back. It can be pushed back into work in progress, for example, for the changes to happen. Every time you do that, it's creating versions for you. So you're having different versions of the same file, which you can always go back and review. Once the file is ready, it could go back into review state, and if it's approved, it can go into a release state where it's locked, and then you don't have any changes that happens to it, and whatever needs, it's out for manufacturing. If there's a change that happened to the file when it's out on being manufactured, perhaps a material change or size changes, you can raise up an engineering change order, which allows you to track to see what the changes were and why. And the idea of this is, if it's a machine, for example, that's being manufactured and it's out on site, and a few years down the line, or perhaps a couple of months down the line, if there's services or part replacement that needs to happen to that, maintenance that needs to happen to that machine, you're working off the latest file with the latest changes. So, team members don't go on site and realize, hang on, there's a problem here. But also controlled access. So again, you give the right people the right access at the right time for the right data. And you could have it at multiple sites. So you could only need to have it in just one area. It could be in different areas, which all connect to the same data, with having the right people access the right time. And if we go back to the people process data, we've always found that models and drawings are being created, libraries are being created often. That library needs to be stored, that data needs to be stored. There's also revision control around what revision, what's revised. If there's any designs that need to be copied, how does it work? And some of the big areas of concern is new product introduction into the environment. So there's new products being designed and worked on. How do you manage and track that new project? Bill of materials, what bill of materials do you pull out of it? If there's any online product data that needs to be incorporated, any supplier collaboration, change management, quality management, how is all that managed? And these are areas of quite a great concern. By having a PDM strategy, it allows you to transfer the data not only in one place, but shared between all of the parties that's involved in the organization, from executives to the engineers, to managers, to quality control people, but also document controllers as well. And what does this mean? It doesn't just mean CAD management inside of a firewall. It also allows us to collaborate outside of the firewall. And if we look at it here, if you manage files with a PDM strategy, if you have a PDM strategy of it, then the first step is, if you don't, the first step is to having one. But also, if you do have one, you got to manage to see how is this being managed and controlled, and what's the best for you. How does the PDM strategy work for you, or having one, how does it work for you, and how is it implemented for you? Again, looking at generally from what we see often, we see that it all happens inside of the firewall where data is shared. So this is the idea of this, is having a PDM strategy installed or implemented in the environment. If you look at it, you see that it happens predominantly inside of the firewall. But with the new way of working and the new digitization way, we find that enabling cloud collaboration is becoming an imperative, where we can actually share data outside of our firewall with different people that need to be involved. This could be suppliers, again, contractors, or people that we need to harness this energy from. What does this result in? it results in interdisciplinary effort. So often you find that it doesn't really need to be just the one department that needs to work on something. It perhaps needs to go into different areas, like designers, for instance. It could be engineers that need to work on our design, have different input. So multidisciplinary engineers. You could have MEP guys or structural engineers or electrical guys that need to work on it. And how do we manage and access that change? It becomes a common objective. So everyone works with the same data, the same file, but with the same objective on the same goal. And what this does is allows updates. If a version or information changes happen on one side, having cloud access, the teams are informed. People are updated on what has changed and how it's changed. And also you can ensure that you get live collaboration between the teams. And traditionally, we know that using a system like Vault, perhaps, which allows us to have strong data management inside of our firewall and collaborate inside of a firewall, as well as out with the new tools that's been introduced by Autodesk with regards to things like the desktop connector and BIM 360 docs, which allows us to actually collaborate inside and outside with people like contractors or engineering service providers or consultants that work outside of the environment. And of course, it helps us when we're doing reviews of documents. It helps us things like shared views, right? It helps us be very specific when we trying to solve challenges that we've been facing when it comes to a review cycle or with customers and suppliers, right? It's a very simple, friendly solution which helps you share outside of your firewall to different users, and of course, the users that you share to would be able to be controlled access as well. So, how does the question here is how does PDM having a PDM strategy solve the issue that we work with? So, for one, Vault provides a central repository for all product information that extends extends out to extended teams, right? And the access to the data is managed through permissions that you set up for them, and it becomes a single source of the truth for their product information. So it's easy for those outside of engineering to participate in reviews and markups, and also monitor product status of product. In addition, the actual design files like 3D CAD models, a lot of production documents are created in a typical unmanaged way. Just merely the design documents are generally managed. In this way, it helps us to merge all of this and have that into a central repository where it's easy to find and easy to manage between that. So some of the areas that we see here is that viewing and markups become easy, staying updated on project statuses, managing bill of materials, managing the review and approval status of the design file becomes quite easy, as well as managing just general document. And collaboration inside and outside of the firewall becomes quite handy in this way. So if we consider the facts, can a PDM strategy really help you out? Of course, the world-class manufacturers taken from the studies that's been conducted by Tech Clarity, the Aberdeen Group, and quite a bit of other studies that we've looked up, we see that 30% are more likely to use a PDM strategy to manage their design data. And these top performers also spend 25% less on non-product data management tasks, right? Which allows them to concentrate on more engineering and more R&D of their products if the data is being managed and taken care of for you. To review the spotlight again, we find that understanding what product data management or having a product data management strategy is quite key and quite critical to us. If you don't have one, it's something to consider, something to look at, and you don't have to start off really big. You can start off with something small like a Vault Basic, for instance, and evolve into something greater as the need grows. What are the impacts of it? And having a digital strategy or PDM strategy in this whole digital transformation, understanding the need for collaboration, also knowing that you can also collaborate outside your firewall as well as inside of your firewall. and having the benefits of having that strategy in place. So the technical references have been taken out the tech clarity perspective, best practices for managing design, again, the definitive guide to PDM, as well as the Aberdeen Group study that's been completed in 2018. Now, if you want a copy of these white papers, please give me a mail back, or perhaps indicate it on the chat box, and I will make this available to you. So the question to ask yourself, have you ever lost design data? Is using design data a challenge for you? Are you wasting time on a weekly basis managing or trying to open data from different sources, as well as collaboration? Are you having any issues collaborating and managing change releases in your environment? And also, you might have issues with compliance. These are important things to actually ask yourself. And if you have answered yes to any one of them, it's perhaps great to actually consider having a data management strategy in place to allow you to facilitate these changes and to better streamline your workflows. I'm going to go into questions now. So thank you for listening so attentively. If there's any questions that you have, please put them in the type box or raise your hand, and we can answer them. So if there's anything that you want to speak about, you can put it onto the type box, and we can answer these questions. See, there's no questions at the moment. I'll give it a couple of minutes more. If there's anything that you might need or might require, I will put in my email address and contact information in the chat box, and you can always pop me an email later on, and we could have a more detailed discussion around that. No further questions. I'd like to thank you for joining the webinar. Please look out for future webinars that we will be hosting, and we look forward to see you there. If there's any questions that you may have, please feel free to get in contact with us, or any discussions you want to have around PDM. Thank you very much, and have a great day ahead.